we're going to close out today's episode with a little bit of tomfoolery. And this is about Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg wants to create AI friends for you in the metaverse. This reminds me of the shitpost that says, I really enjoy the concept of IRL podcasting, where you and your boys meet up in a public place, but nobody's recording. Nothing's going on. You're just sharing ideas and having conversations. And there's a quote tweet above that shitpost, another shitpost that said, Tech Bro discovers hanging out. These tech oligarchs, I believe, are fundamentally disconnected from humanity because they have based their whole life around something artificial. I say this as someone who posts online, as someone who has spent literally the majority of my life online. There is, however, a key distinction in the fact that I go outside. I talk to people. I have real life interactions with people whom I don't know, with new people. I go to the gym. I go to a public place. I go to public parks to play basketball. Sometimes I just sit outside. I remove myself from the online world because the online world will fundamentally alter your brain. It will make you see things that are not real. It will turn you, in some cases, into it will cause you to hallucinate and to warp your perception of reality. I'm saying this as someone who over the last couple of years has cut down considerably on the time that I spend online for this very reason. I am looking to preserve my mental sanity. Is that to say that I've deleted TikTok and Twitter off my phone? No, definitely not. I do still enjoy seeing some Italian brain rot. Like I enjoy when I see a tralalero tralala meme come across my page. It's also how I communicate with some of my friends. I will never entirely abandon social media, especially if I'm doing this, because like I have to be tapped in a little bit. But it comes down to seeing or to understanding your priorities. I would much rather foster meaningful relationships with real life people than to spend all of my time online chatting with fucking bots. Mark Zuckerberg, however, does not believe in that. His failed project of the metaverse is a way for him to siphon people out of reality and keep them addicted to all of his products. He's on a podcast here talking about building personalized AI friends. It is some of the most dystopian shit I've ever heard. And again, this is coming from someone who is online enough to see some really dystopian stuff.
Loop kicks in and the AI just starts to get to know you better and better. I think that will just be really compelling. One thing.
First flaw here, and he's talking about just like having emotional conversations with a robot. First off, this is terribly isolationist if you're doing this. The other reason, and I'm not saying that to like be mean, I'm saying that as like a wake-up call, where if you find yourself having emotional conversations with ChatGPT, I think there needs to be a little bit of self-reflection done there. They are not in any way, shape, or form equipped to deal with the real life issues that human beings face. If you are able to afford to go to a therapist, do that. Speak with an actual person. Speak with somebody who has lived life experiences. AI and what are they? LLM, large language models. They don't have real life experience. They are simply collecting data and interpreting what other people are telling them. Furthermore, let's say you have an emotional conversation with a chatbot and instead of a friend. The chatbot cannot recognize when you are behaving erratically. The chatbot cannot see you and see that you're like being fidgety, or that you're looking all over the place, or that you're having issues focusing, or that you're rambling on and on. A person can see that, and they can tell you like, "Hey, you are behaving differently. Let's get you the necessary help that you need."
Just from working on social media for a long time is there's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think, it's fewer than 3 friends. 3 people that they consider friends. And
He's
and the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's like
I'm gonna
15
let him
friends or
finish,
something,
but
right? I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people. But
okay, I'm not gonna let him finish. He's misrepresenting this study. The study that he's talking about claims that like 40% of people have anywhere between 3 and 5 close friends. Not just friends in general, close friends. That study also mentions that 8% of people do not have any close friends, which is a massive problem. A massive problem brought on by the isolation imposed by freaks like Mark Zuckerberg, who seek to trap young, impressionable people in an artificial reality. Getting back to the 3 to 5 close friends part, that I think is relatively normal. I myself have only a small percentage of people whom I would say are close friends, but I have a larger friend group in general. You don't need that many close friends, and your designation of close friends might be different. It's people who you hang out with frequently, it's people who you have intimate and thoughtful conversations with. It's people that, if you need someone to pick up the phone, will pick up the phone for you. As you grow up, your friend circle shrinks a little bit because people grow up and they change, and you grow distant and you grow apart from one another. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. The issue is not having a lot of friends. The issue is not being in the environment to foster these kinds of relationships. This is isolation, again, that is brought on by social media addiction. It should be very telling to you that people like Mark Zuckerberg will not allow their children to use their products because they know how damaging these products are to people in general, but especially to young people.
but the average person wants more connectivity, connection than they have. Um, so
Which is true,
there's a
I
lot of
would
questions
assert.
that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace kind of in-person connections or real life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think it I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them, but the reality is that people just don't have the connection and they feel more alone um, a lot of the time than they would like. So I think that a lot of
This
these
is
things that
this reminds me of the quote when OJ Simpson is like, "I'm never going back to LA. The killer might be out there." Or when Jeffrey Epstein says that I hate pedophiles, or that R. Kelly says that Bill Cosby is a sick person who belongs in prison. My brother in Christ, you are almost like single-handedly the reason as to why people have issues developing these kinds of relationships with other people. It's not their fault. It's your fault. It's your fault for designing products that are intentionally manipulative, that intentionally feed people hateful content so that way they become angrier and can't recognize that outside people are not like that. Outside people are not as highly polarized as they may be on social media. This is even true, for instance, for people like myself. I get on the camera and I act up a little bit. And by act up a little bit, I engage in hyperbole. I engage in exaggeration. I ham up my performance for the camera. In real life, I still hold like the same beliefs, but my language is different because I have to remember that I'm around normal people. And the best way to foster these connections is to appear, and I hate to use the word like normal, but is to not come off as like a super online person that is off-putting to people. It's also interesting because Mark Zuckerberg is unfortunately correct when he says that people have the capacity for more connection. And I do believe that. I believe that loneliness and isolation, particularly among young people, is going to be hugely devastating to them once they come of age. They are not going to have the appropriate social skills. They are already going to feel neglected by society. But the resolution to that is not to create a digital world where they can meet people. It is to reimagine the physical world to make it easier for people to establish these connections. Unfortunately, part of that in the real world would require the alteration of the digital world. It would require the government stepping in and busting up the monopolies that Microsoft and Google have created, or that Meta and Microsoft and Google have created. It would require the legislation of laws to protect children from social media. I understand that that is very authoritarian, but I think it is highly necessary to ensure that these children grow up and have the adequate social skills to be able to thrive in adult situations and be able to exist around other people, even more so in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, where children for an entire year were not exposed to other children. That was not self-inflicted harm in the same way that social media is.
Today, there might be a little bit of a stigma around. I would guess that over time, we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable and why the people who are doing these things are like, why they are rational for doing it, and how it is adding value for their lives. But also, I think that the field is very early. So
is this guy? No, I mean, this guy is
a lot of the.
Dude, Mark Zuckerberg needs to just go to Alaska. He needs to find a cabin and hide for the remainder of his life. This guy is beyond delusional. He does not. I don't know what kind of bubble this guy lives in. I've never seen anything like it before. And the fact that, like, where is his PR team? Why the fuck is anyone associated with this guy not changing his rhetoric at all? Did he fire the PR team that he had before he went on Joe Rogan? Because, like, to a normal person, this comes off as insane. To an online person, this comes off as insane. Let's run it back.
Have the connection and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So I think that a lot of these things that today there might be a little bit of a stigma around, I would guess that over time we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable and why the people who are doing these things are like, why they are rational for doing it, and how it is adding value for their lives. But also, I think that the field is very early. So I mean, it's I think, there are a handful of companies and stuff who are doing virtual therapist, and there's like virtual girlfriend.
Dude, this is insane, because the reason why there are stigmas attached to it is because a chatbot does not give a fuck about you as a person. It doesn't care. It doesn't feel emotion. It exists only within the realm of collecting knowledge that it has scraped from the internet and from other conversations that it's had with people. A real life therapist, a real life friend, a real life girlfriend is going to have more of an emotional attachment to you than a fucking robot. If something happens to you, your friends, your family will cry real tears. They will feel distraught. They will feel anxious. They will be apprehensive. A chatbot will not. This is why this is dangerous. This is why this is insidious. You are stripping away the emotional aspect of being a human being. You are stripping away one of the traits that separate humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. There are literally only like 2 or 3 differences between a human being and a fucking hippopotamus. Hippopotamuses cannot create art. Hippopotamuses cannot build bridges and skyscrapers. And hippopotamuses cannot feel emotion to the same degree that human beings do. When there is an animal that actually feels emotion on a human level, it's talked about. And even then, it's not even confirmed that these animals are even feeling these emotions. To be human is to emote. It is to feel sad. It is to feel happy. It is to feel bitter. It is to feel anxiety. The chatbot, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence will never be able to replicate that. And even if it does get to that point, artificial intelligence as an industry will die out because it will take too long and it will be too costly to develop that kind of quote unquote technology. You cannot teach a robot to feel emotion. You cannot teach a robot to experience reason. You cannot transmit your real life human experience into a chatbot, and that chatbot will not be able to empathize with you. If you go to your therapist and you tell them that you had to put your dog down over the weekend, the therapist is going to have a real human moment. It may not be visible, but they will feel pain. They will feel anguish. They will potentially relive the memory of them having to put their own dog down. Same thing with the losing of a family member. You tell your friends that, your grandparent passed away or you lost an uncle or an aunt. Your friend connects with you emotionally, having lived through that same experience. The chatbot does not.
Type stuff, but it's very early.
It's very early, and I hope it stays very early because there is no place in society for people like Mark Zuckerberg who have these fucking grandiose dreams of turning the human race into fucking into slightly more sentient robots. Why oh why do these billionaire freaks insist on being celebrities? Why can't you take your $100 billion and just sit in your fucking mansion in Palo Alto and leave us the fuck alone? Like, do literally anything else. Build a library, build a school, build a firehouse. Like, dude, Stanford University is named after a railroad magnate. Like, I'm not condoning the existence of robber barons, but at least back in the day, like, we got Vanderbilt University, we got Carnegie Hall. This fucking idiot is giving us fake girlfriends. What like why have we devolved so much as a species?